Welcome everybody who has attended here. We're very happy to have you all. It's safe to say we have more people attending this meeting than we expected originally. We originally planned a kind of very informal office hour style conversation, but with the number of people that registered for it, we decided that we should probably have had a little informal presentation on kind of what we think is going on with AI and prospect research, and then we can open up the floor to a discussion amongst everybody. Also, it's safe to say we're going to be doing more of these, whether they're large group or small group. We'd actually love your feedback on that later in one of the polls that Matt's going to be putting up. But yeah, we're hoping for a brief presentation and then a lot of time for conversation. Thanks for joining us, and I'm going to kick things off for my colleague Grace, who's going to be conducting the presentation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. Hi, everybody. My name is Grace here with CharityCAN, and thanks, everybody, for taking the time to attend this webinar today. Today, we'll be talking a little bit about AI and prospect research, specifically touching on the topics of data privacy, accuracy, and a couple of practical application examples as well. And then we'll end off the chat, like what Robert said, with the discussion at the end. So yeah, touching on privacy, data privacy first. We all know it's paramount in donor and prospect research, and as you integrate various AI tools into your workflow, it's crucial to understand how your interaction data is being handled. So for example, one popular AI tool provider, OpenAI, states that their business tier products don't use your interaction data by default to help improve their models or train their models. For individual tier products, interaction data is used unless you manually opt out in your account settings, which you can do in the OpenAI chat. Anthropic from Amazon is another popular provider. They state that by default, your interaction data will not be used unless you explicitly grant permission, either through submitting feedback or reaching out to them directly. And then by reviewing your usage policies of any of those AI tools you consider, you can confidently safeguard your data privacy while also taking advantage of the various benefits that AI does have to offer. The next point is accuracy. So at their core, most AI tools are built on large language models, or LLMs. These generate responses by predicting the next word based on patterns learned from vast amounts of training data. This enables AI to excel at tasks like answering questions about well-known topics, drafting emails, or writing code, for example. However, AI isn't perfect. Some tasks are precise and rule-based, so this can challenge AI, which does rely more on those patterns and probabilities versus exact calculations. And this is why the context you provide in your prompts can also have a significant impact on the accuracy of the responses you receive. So by providing clear context in your prompts, and that in itself can greatly improve the accuracy of AI responses. And then again, since the AI models rely on those patterns rather than true understanding, they might misinterpret vague requests or lack the additional data needed to generate accurate results if you don't provide that extra context. So by being specific and outlining exactly what you need, you can help AI produce answers that are more precise and aligned with your expectations, especially for tasks that require exactness and adherence to specific rules. One practical example of this, for example, is CharityCAN's AI-generated summaries. So to ensure that we produce accurate summaries of prospect profiles, we provide the AI model with detailed information like donation history, prospect, like board memberships, compensation, and more on that prospect profile. And additionally, we structure our prompts to ensure that only the provided data is used to create the summary. This ensures that the AI generates content that is relevant and specific to each profile. And on the other hand, if we simply provided just a profile name, ambiguity could arise. The AI might mix up people with the same name or fill in gaps with incorrect information. And this kind of just highlights, again, how providing clear and detailed context greatly improves the accuracy of that AI-generated data. And then the last part of this presentation is just practical applications. So, of course, this can definitely vary depending on what exactly you're doing. But now that we've covered kind of the data privacy and accuracy, how exactly can AI assist prospect researchers with their daily workflow? One significant advantage of AI is its ability to accurately analyze large volumes of text. So when given the proper context, again, for example, if you're tasked with reviewing an annual report over 20 pages long to find mentions of grants or scholarships, AI tools that support file uploads like GPT-4o could be invaluable. You can simply upload the document and the AI model can help you pinpoint the information you need by answering specific questions about that document's content. Another great way to incorporate AI is by using it to inquire about well-known or widely publicized topics. So some tools like, again, GPT-4o or Claude offer a web browsing feature that allows the model to search the internet for your queries, which means you can get up-to-date answers along with the cited sources. And of course, speaking of citations, many AI models can provide links to their information sources when prompted as well. So by asking AI to cite its sources, you can easily cross-reference and verify the data it provides, adding an extra layer of trust to your research process. But yeah, that's the brief prospect research and AI presentation. I'm going to pass it off to Matt for some questions and conversation.
Yeah, hi, Vix. My name is Matt Charters here at CharityCAN. So yeah, we were hoping, like Robert said, we were expecting maybe we weren't quite sure what to expect. So we were hoping that people were going to come with, questions that they were curious about AI. We'd love to hear about, if you're comfortable sharing what you're currently using AI for. And yeah, if you have questions about any of the things we just touched on, security or how these things work, how you might want to try to apply them in your work, we'd love to hear them. There's a big crowd, so either feel free to write it down in the Q&A tab across the top of the Teams meeting. If you click there, you can take a look at you can post a question and we can start a discussion that way. Or there's another, like a raise hand button. If you can raise your hands, we can start with a question that way as well. So yeah, if there's anybody who wants to chat with us and kind of kick things off, let us know. Otherwise, we can. Robert might have some questions if nobody else does.
Yeah, I certainly do. Are there any ethical concerns about using artificial intelligence in prospect research, Matt?
Yeah, so I think this question comes up a lot. And I think you can think about it a couple different ways. One is, a lot of, I think it ties in a lot with the security of these models, and data leakage. You want to make sure that if you're using, especially some of these chat bots, if you're using them to ask questions about donors in your donor database, you want to make sure that that data is not going to be used to train new data. Perhaps maybe you don't want that donor specific information. If you have private donor information in your database, you probably don't want to be giving that to another program unless you know exactly how that data is going to be used. Grace mentioned some of the free tools that are out there when you're talking about a free ChatGPT subscription. OpenAI is taking the data that you're inputting as a prompt and using that and the interactions that you have with the model after that to kind of improve things moving forward. So yeah, in that case, you probably wouldn't want to be disclosing donor information to a free tool. Maybe you want to save that for a paid version, which isn't going to use your data for training. The other important thing is just to make sure that your donors know what you're doing with their data. I think that's probably goes without saying if you're saving donor data for any specific purposes, but just again to be mindful of, if you're going to be using donor data to, even if you get as far as training your own models, you probably want your donors aware that their data is going to be used in certain ways, and hopefully, they can sort of opt in or opt out of those different ways if they'd like. So those are a couple that came.
Nice, thank you for that. That was a good explanation of that. One other question I had. What are AI hallucinations? Like, is this a risk when I'm talking about accuracy? This is something I read about a fair bit, and to be honest, I hear you and Grace talk about sometimes too. So now I get a chance to ask you.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, as Grace mentioned, these large language models, when you're interacting with something like ChatGPT or Claude, These large language models are, they're basically taking what you've typed in as a question, and they are predicting a likely answer, or what they think is a likely answer, or an appropriate answer, based on all of the training data, so all of the information that was used when creating the model. So they're using that data, they're using the data that you've input into as a prompt, and they're going to come up with the next set of words that it thinks is going to make sense for you. So you just have to be careful that, what makes sense is not necessarily what's true. And so that's what, if a AI returns some text that might make a nice sentence, but that isn't factually true, that's when we talk about hallucinating, right? So that's how the model comes up with a hallucination, something that's not necessarily, that's not a real thing. It just sounds great. And that's kind of, you do have to look out for that. But as Grace said, there's ways to mitigate that. You can, certain tools allow you to cite sources. So the tool can actually go out, search the internet, perform like a Google or Bing search, find some text to analyze, and then use that text as part of the prompt as well. So that it's kind of got the data. You can kind of think of it as like a short-term memory almost. It's got your question, and it's got about a bunch of text that it's been able to pull out of a document, or a web page. And then the text that comes after that, when it's doing its generation, is much more likely to be accurate because it's based on text that it's just seen. It's got some facts top of mind almost that it can spit out as part of your answer. And so that can really help with the hallucination. So either, by asking these tools that have the capabilities to go out to the internet and source documents for you, that's one way to do it. The other, as Grace also mentioned, is to sort of upload that data as part of your query. You can upload a document, for example, to ChatGPT and have it answer questions about that document. And because it's got that text handy right there, it can sort of read through the text, collect all the tokens, all the words that are in the text, and then use that as part of the response. So that will also cut down on hallucinations a lot. You probably all saw, all the stories of journalists and reporters that were talking to these early models where they would start making up fantastical stories. And, I think one AI chatbot declared its love for the reporter and things like that. But these were after big long conversations with the person, a lot of back and forth with the chatbot. And so if you think of it as this constant stream of text and then always trying to come up with something that makes sense, you can imagine a scenario where going back and forth and trying to almost evoke like a big response out of the chatbot can create these fantastical stories. If you ask the chatbot to give you some interesting stuff like that, if you're a journalist looking for sort of interesting responses to your prompts, eventually, and you ask enough times, you're probably going to get that, because ultimately the model is going to try to appease you almost, like it's trying to do its best to say, oh, I think according to the rest of this conversation, I think this is what this person wants to hear, or I think this is the most likely next step in the story. So just keep that in mind while you're chatting. That's a very long-winded explanation of hallucinations, I think. But
no, thank you. Thank you. That was great, because that was kind of a thing. A lot of those early articles seemed to kind of focus on that. So I was wondering if that kind of maybe seeped into the general public consciousness maybe a little more than it should have and got a little overblown. But no, thanks. That was fantastic. We should open it up to the floor here. Someone must have a question or a concern or a fear or even just a story about using AI in prospect research. We'd love to hear from anyone in the room today. Does anyone have anything they'd like to talk about today?
Yeah, I believe you all have the ability, if you can't find the raise hand button or the Q&A bar in the webinar here, I think you all have the ability to unmute yourselves and appear on camera. So that's another way to do it. It's just to pop in and say hi. So yeah, please do.
Well, maybe think about that for a little bit. If you have a question, think about it for a little bit, because I do have a couple more. Oh, there, we've got one.
Yeah, Michelle says she's found it helpful to start a prompt by asking the AI to reword her prompt for clarity and then use the revised prompt to answer the query. Also use ACT as a prospect researcher as a starting point. So yes, and that's sort of like, yeah, exactly. So that's a great idea, Michelle, and that kind of speaks to that. Like I said, if you kind of give the model something to use, either a document or as Michelle's using a prompt, it can really help the model sort of get steered in the right direction. Researchers, it's interesting, like what goes on, and nobody really understands, or we're only starting to understand the sort of inner workings of these models. But I even saw something that said, when you get the most likely response, the most likely response might not even be the best response, which is why you can kind of sometimes prompt these models to say, like, you are an expert, like an expert in this field, so give me the expert answer. So it might not be the most likely answer if it's like a wrong answer or something like that, but it'll get the most expert answer because it'll be prompted to sort of give the non-standard answer or the more expertise sounding answer or something like that. So it is really helpful when you can, when you can sort of prompt it, give it a little bit of, a lot of these tools allow you to redefine what's called the system prompt. So that's sort of like the overall bit of information. And in the background, that bit of information gets added to pretty much every question or every conversation you start with these agents. So it's always got that little bit of context about you, like saying, oh, I want you to be an expert prospect researcher. I want you to know everything there is to know about Canadian fundraising. And you can have that in the background. So we've even done that sort of like, I think we'll have a link to it later, but we've created a free sort of GPT. Anybody with a ChatGPT account has access to something called CharityCAN GPT that we've created. And so like you can add it, and we've done some of that sort of initial system prompting to say, hey, please, you're an expert prospect researcher, you know everything about Canadian fundraising, you're always accurate, you never make anything up, you can only say like verifiable facts and things like that. And so that, and hopefully that'll kind of start steering the AI model in the right direction when you're interacting with it. And we'll post a link to that folks can use. So yeah, anytime you're talking to one of these things, it really helps to sort of, to know some of these tricks, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it sounds like what I'm hearing is like very good for like data and document analysis, and accurate prompts are super important. That's kind of my big takeaway from the last couple of the questions, I guess.
Yeah, it's really worthwhile if you haven't used some of these models a lot. It's really worthwhile just to try them out. It honestly, for myself, just not having used these a lot, it takes a while to sort of get used to it and understand what you can do to sort of like get it moving in the right direction, or even find your own use cases that you think can be useful. So it requires a little bit of a mind shift to kind of understand what's even possible with these tools. But when you find out some things that work, then it can be super helpful. I found it just helpful for reformatting documents, or just any sort of like small menial task, because a lot of these tools can even write code for you in the background to process your spreadsheets and stuff like that. So if you're doing that, again, you don't want to be uploading spreadsheets to any free version of ChatGPT or anything like that. So make sure you've cleared it with your IT department or somebody at your organization. That would be that's one way to. Oh, I see. It looks
Go
like
ahead, Graham.
Catherine, but
Graham.
Yes, we have a hand up here. Okay.
Yeah, that's me.
Go ahead. Hey, Catherine.
Hey, this is really timely because I actually just did a presentation on the basics of AI at my workplace this morning.
Right.
But I was wondering if there's anyone working in prospect research who is using paid versions of any tools, because that's where I'm finding some of my worries about data security come from. I tend to be maybe overly cautious myself, but I don't have a workplace account for ChatGPT, or I mostly use Anthropic, but I'm using the free version. And even for meeting transcriptions, I've been using a free version of a transcriber, and it makes me wonder what's happening to my data. And so I'm curious if anyone has been able to get paid subscriptions at their workplaces.
Yeah, great question. I definitely know that we.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. go Grace, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't mean to interject, but I think with Anthropic specifically on their free version, they don't use your data unless you submit feedback in the chat. So for example, if you say like, hey, this answer is terrible, then they'll use that data and maybe data from that conversation. But as far as I understand in their privacy policy, they don't use your data on any of their plans unless you specifically opt in or you submit that feedback.
That's usually why I prefer it, but it's still I don't have complete trust, and even then I'm still using the free version, so I don't know what I'm missing. You know, like if it would be so much better to have the paid version. I know one of my colleagues uses the paid version for like as a personal account, but ChatGPT 4, but we're not using that for work, obviously.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'd be curious to see too, because a lot of folks in prospect research are at larger organizations, and universities and hospitals will have their own IT departments and things like that. So, I mean, there's other solutions that you can do as well. You don't, you're not strictly like tied to these commercial models. If you've got, a lot of places will have maybe the I don't know if people will have the know-how in the IT departments, but they IT people are usually people that want to solve problems and kind of tinker with stuff. So there are, most cloud providers will be able to host sort of a private GPT for you in some way. There's even, newer startups coming out that will let you run like a GPT or a language model on your laptop. So that's like the most private you can get, is just like chatting on your laptop with like a smaller model that might not be as awesome at like doing advanced reasoning as like the ChatGPT 4 stuff that's happening right now, but it's still pretty good for doing the kind of data analysis and things like that we've talked about. So there probably are other options, beyond just the big commercial ones, but it would be, you probably have to get buy-in or talk to somebody in your IT departments to see if they're thinking about this kind of stuff and kind of just seeing if they're thinking about how people are going to be using this, because I think it's really important. I mean, we're using paid stuff here at work just because we want to make sure that our data is being used. We want to make sure we know what's going on with our data.
Sounds like Port Parole has a pretty good system going on. They're using paid accounts in the chat. You'll see that.
Port Parole GPT, great. That's I think everybody can see these, but they've at Port Parole they're using individual paid plans, and they've also created their own internal Port Parole GPT that they're hoping that they can give their communication documents and materials and things like that, so that it knows more about how to communicate with donors, and can, I assume, if you're going to write an email to a potential donor, you're using some of the terms and some of the marketing material that's been prepared already. So that's a great idea. And we have a question: how can AI streamline the process of identifying new donor prospects and predicting their likelihood to give? Great question. I think you can probably, we've had some luck in just sort of starting the ball rolling, imagining using our CharityCAN GPT again, which is, we've prompted to be a prospect research expert. We found some useful, especially if you're at a smaller organization or something like that, or in a smaller area. You can kind of, I think Robert's done this before, but just say like, imagine I'm a hospital foundation in Saskatchewan. Who are some potential corporate donors for me? And, so things that are out there on the open record on the internet, it'll be pretty good at finding, pulling out of its training data, large corporations in Saskatchewan, for example, and things like that. So for that kind of prospecting, and, news articles about prominent philanthropists and things like that. When it gets down to like small individuals and things like that, I think most of these models have some sort of privacy control where beyond a certain level they try not to let individual data sort of come out in these questions. So I think you can probably get a good initial list of some larger donors. I think, Robert, like, unless you've seen anything else, but as far as getting down into the nitty gritty, like, you may need to use other tools, but
Yeah, and I think the second part of your question, Matthew, about predicting their likelihood to give, that's an interesting one too. And I think that's probably coming up in the future. I don't think anyone's there quite now with predicting likelihood to give with AI. I'm sure some shops are working on it, but yeah, I think that's the next stage too, and that's the kind of stuff CharityCAN wants to be here to help everyone that's in this meeting come to a conclusion on, is how can we utilize these tools to do these really cool things like you're suggesting, predicting likelihood to give.
Yeah, I guess if like those large language models again are better at predicting the next possible text in an outcome. If you're starting to talk about predictive analytics, then you might be looking at more, I guess they're kind of called more traditional machine learning approaches. So where you are taking some data from your donor database, looking at what makes what makes a record in your donor database. Are there any flags to identify somebody as a major donor, or given the set of major donors, what are the flags that are on all our major donors that sort of, and you let the machine figure out what those flags are, kind of what makes a person a major donor, and then the next time somebody comes into your donor database with that set of characteristics, you can kind of say, okay, maybe this person's a good candidate for our major gift program as opposed to our monthly giving program or something like that.
Yeah, great
That's
question.
another way.
Yeah,
you can definitely use predictive analytics, but I'd say, yeah, maybe you could use the LLM to sort of suggest some new names, and then if you were to put those names into a database and get some external data, and then run your predictive algorithm, then maybe you'd get the predicting the likelihood part. But so yeah, like Robert said, I don't think we've got like an all-in-one package for that yet, but maybe someday.
Thanks for the great conversation here, folks. We really do appreciate it. Oh, we've still got one more question we'll get to, and then we'll just jump to the end here.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, no, it's more of a comment on using paid versus free ChatGPT accounts in prospect research, to Catherine's point earlier.
Oh, Grace has her hand.
Oops, that was, mistake. Did not raise my hand.
All right, cool. Well, since we're kind of coming to the end here, I'm going to pop another poll into everybody's screen here. Yeah, just about, if this was a fun thing to do for half an hour, and would you like to participate again, and kind of how would you like to participate again? We were picturing like, we've never done one of these before, so we thought, maybe a couple people will show up and we'll have a nice chat. But it was, a big crowd in the end. So yeah, what would you like to do? And then if we've got a couple links here in our slides. I don't know, can we? Oh yeah, you can even click on them. That's great. So we've got our AI at CharityCAN newsletter that you can subscribe to, where we can send you news about new AI features that appear in CharityCAN. There's a link there actually to chat with me. I'd love to hear what our customers or folks out there are doing with AI, what they want to do with AI. We want to build stuff to help you. So you can book a half hour to chat kind of one-on-one if that's something you'd like to do. And we've got, like I said, the link to CharityCAN GPT. So if you are a GPT user, you can try out CharityCAN GPT. Try to generate some prospect lists.
And you really should. It is so cool. I use it pretty much daily, and I'm not a prospect researcher. I just use it for stuff. It's fantastic. I think you folks will all really like trying out CharityCAN GPT. I cannot recommend it enough. I was blown away when they first showed it to me.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. We really appreciate it. A ton of familiar names on the registration list that I was really happy to see. And I can't thank you enough, and looking forward to the next one. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Bye.